if your goal is to make a lot of progress in the next decade, then the best way to think about that is Bitcoin is 100 times better than gold, which means Bitcoin's going to get 100 times bigger than it is right now. And we should spend our time explaining to people why Bitcoin is better than gold, better than owning an equity index fund, better than owning a second investment property, better than owning a bunch of heavy metals, right? Better than owning farmland. And you could do that, and Bitcoin could become a $250 trillion ecosystem without threatening anybody, right? There is no nation of gold. Gold doesn't have a police force, has no army. There's no NSA, CIA protecting gold, right? There's no one that's going to fight and die for gold. There's no president of gold. No one's getting elected to defend gold, right? So if what you want to do is improve the human condition as fast as you can with the least amount of confusion and friction and unintended consequences, then you simply attack the nation of gold and you swap out everyone that wants sound money in the form of gold for Bitcoin. And after you finish that, you swap out $100 trillion of real estate and property investments for Bitcoin. And after that, you swap out corporate bonds and equity, and you demonetize equity and you demonetize corporate bonds. And by the time you've done that, you probably will have changed the politics in 100 countries, and you'll probably have very favorable politicians, and Bitcoin probably will have built itself into the political apparatus of those countries.
The primary topic of debate on financial markets and cryptocurrency in particular was the recorded U.S. inflation, which reached an all-time high and prompted another round of asset sales. Michael Saylor, CEO of MicroStrategy and a well-known crypto enthusiast and Bitcoin expert, didn't dismiss the hot topic and once again gave his opinion on what Bitcoin is really worth. Hello and welcome to Money Talks. In today's video, Michael Saylor talks about the future of Bitcoin, other cryptocurrencies, the US dollar, and the world economy. He also explains the key difference between money and currency and why Bitcoin is the need of the hour amid high inflation report by the Fed. Make sure to stick around till the end of this video where Michael explains about the implications of Bitcoin on the world we live in today. So without wasting any time, let's dive right into the video.
You have to imagine, I don't know what you think about government, a worldwide benevolent government, and the government decided to adopt Austrian economics and eliminated all the fiat currencies. And so we went to 100% Bitcoin everywhere in the world. No war. We'll leave that off for a second. And then you just went to a complete hard money standard. Then you would have the Austrian ideal, and you'd have a deflationary economy, and then the price of everything would get cheaper every year. It would get cheaper at the rate that the economy grew. Mm-hmm. If we added 2% more productivity a year, then everything would get 2% cheaper a year. And so you just have to imagine that there's a nation. I haven't really thought through whether you can do it for 1 out of 100 nations, right? Because the other 99 nations would also have access to Bitcoin, but they'd have other currencies, and there'd be political dynamics and military and war dynamics that you have to work through. So I haven't quite worked that out, but it seems to me that if you have the support of the nation state to adopt a single currency, and that's Bitcoin, then you could make it work. I mean, it's not going to happen in the next 30 years. Not that I could see 100 years out, 200 years out, sometime in the distant future. You would have to rebuild. First of all, you have to answer the question, what do we do with all the countries? Mm-hmm. And then after you figure out that, what do we do with all the currencies? And then how did we persuade everybody? And then after that, you have to rebuild the accounting systems and rebuild all the software systems. But in theory, right, there's that future. I just don't think it's practical anytime in the next few decades.
According to Saylor, with US inflation at a record 9.1% and other major global reserve currencies depreciating even more rapidly against the US dollar, many people still do not realize that one Bitcoin equals nothing more than one Bitcoin. Thus, Saylor makes it clear that as a true adept of cryptocurrencies, he does not correlate the rate of cryptocurrencies with fiat currencies. And despite the strong pressure of macroeconomic statistics on Bitcoin quotations, its real value remains unshaken. Meanwhile, MicroStrategy's paper loss from Bitcoin holdings currently exceeds $1 billion. As of June 28th, the company owned 129,699 Bitcoin, valued at nearly $4 billion, and bought at an average price of $30,664 per Bitcoin. MicroStrategy's latest documented Bitcoin purchases totaled 480 BTC, worth $10 million.
So what you end up with is the same thing you're suggesting for Bitcoin replacing the dollar is the thing that the dollar needs to do to replace the Argentine peso, right?
Mm-hmm.
The dollar is a much better currency in Argentina than the peso. So if you wanted to watch how hyper-Bitcoinization happens, watch how dollarization happens. And does it happen with bloodshed or without bloodshed? Right? Like El Salvador dollarized, but it was after a civil war.
Mm.
Right? I mean, and so go look at all the different countries in the world and ask the question, how do they change currencies and how do they adopt a stronger currency? Right? And it's a slow process. And like the Argentine peso has been collapsing for 20 years. Well, actually, technically,
For
if you study history, yeah, I think in the House of Morgan, right? The guy that ran the bank before the first J.P. Morgan, he got into the business by bailing out busted Argentine bonds and the like. I mean, Argentina's had sovereign debt collapses since the late 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
That we can measure every 20 years for the last 150 years, right? So. Like 1920s, there's another South American round of collapses. In the 1950s, I did another round. In 1970s, another round. 1990s, another round. And now we're in another round. So this has been going on for a while. Normally what happens is the country's currency collapses. Look, the Russian currency collapsed in the late 90s. What'd they do? They installed the new ruble. The Mexican currency collapsed. What'd they do? They installed the new Mexican peso. Right? What happens when you collapse the currency? Generally, the question is, does the government stay or go?
Yeah.
So if the government collapses so badly that you become a province of the United States, right? If you were Hawaiian and you actually ran your own Hawaiian empire and then your nation collapsed, then you might become a state in the United States and adopt the dollar. But generally, you have to have a political union to have a monetary union.
The U.S. CPI inflation index showed an increase to 9.1% in the last 12 months that ended in June, the largest 12-month increase since November 1981. At the same time, the markets were expecting a figure of 8.8%, which was not justified and is causing an extremely negative reaction at the moment. Bitcoin reacted with a 5.7% decline at the time of publication, but had managed to gain back 2.72% by the time the news broke.
The currency is a very, very deep-seated, strong network effect. And this accrues to the United States because if you have the world's reserve currency, then your reserve currency is built into the accounting systems and into the exchanges and the marketplaces of every country on earth, and it's built into all of the property assets, right? Because the currency is built into the bonds, it's built into commercial real estate leases. They're 30-year leases, right, that are indexed to the United States CPI. And so if you were to calculate the total amount of investment in all of these things, you realize it's extraordinary. So ultimately, money is energy. you have a lot of flexibility about how you store your economic energy, and you have to decide what your goal is. Do you want to hold it for 1,000 years? Do you want it to be portable? Do you want it to be programmable? Do you want it to be high frequency? Do you want high velocity money? Do you want to move it every day, every week, every month? And so depending upon what your use is of the money, you would probably, and also your political nexus and your geographic nexus.
The inflation report means that the Federal Reserve will likely continue to hike interest rates aggressively in a bid to shrink the supply of US dollars in circulation. Theoretically, this should decrease the consumer demand for goods and services and tame the rampant inflation. Bitcoin saw a dramatic rally as the US central bank and other banks around the world went on a money printing spree during the pandemic. At the time, there was an untested narrative that the benchmark cryptocurrency would act as a hedge against inflation because the asset has a capped supply of 21 million coins. So what do you think about high inflation and the role of Bitcoin? Tell us in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon with the next video. Thank you so much for watching.